The sun had barely risen when the first column rolled forward. Smoke curled on the horizon, and the city's skyline, already scarred from months of bombardment, seemed to bend under the weight of armored steel and booted feet. On September 15, 2025, the Israeli Defense Forces launched a new, massive ground offensive aimed at seizing control of Gaza City, an operation that officials framed as a final push to dismantle militant networks and establish long-term control over the entire urban area. This isn't a raid or a limited sweep. It is a campaign on a scale that planners say aims for total dominance of the city. Why now? The shift in strategy. For years, much of the fighting around Gaza took the shape of targeted strikes, surgical incursions, and limited ground raids designed to hit militant infrastructure without attempting a full occupation. What changed was both political and tactical. Hostage negotiations stalled, pressure to remove remaining militant capabilities increased, and the Israeli government ordered a much larger mobilization of reserve forces, signaling intent for a prolonged, citywide operation rather than a short-term raid. In late August and September 2025, the IDF announced plans to call up roughly 60,000 reservists in preparation for an expanded campaign, one of the largest single call-ups of the war. The scale of the campaign. This offensive is notable not only for the number of troops but for its combined arms ambition. The IDF has massed tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, engineering units, artillery, and air support focused on concentrated sectors of Gaza City, especially central neighborhoods that were previously avoided for fear of endangering hostages or flattening entire civilian districts. Commanders have described the operation as staged in phases: encirclement, intense urban combat to clear strongholds, then methodical clearance and occupation. The goal, according to military framing, is to remove any remaining command hubs and tunnels that enable guerrilla tactics while establishing a persistent presence inside the city. Reporting and press briefings in mid-September confirmed the offensive's phased progression and the widespread deployment across central Gaza. The human cost so far. Any discussion of tactics must also confront the human toll. By mid-2025, Palestinian health authorities and local reporting estimated tens of thousands of fatalities and hundreds of thousands of displaced civilians as a result of the conflict. As of July 2025, Gaza's health officials reported casualty figures approaching 58,895 deaths attributed to the ongoing hostilities, with many more wounded and displaced. These numbers have been widely circulated in regional reporting and humanitarian updates. On the Israeli side, the death toll from the October 7th attacks and subsequent fighting numbered in the low thousands, with civilians and military personnel among the casualties. These figures underscore the immense humanitarian stakes as ground operations expand in densely populated city areas. The tactical problem. Decentralized insurgency. One of the central reasons Israel moved from bombardment to a final ground push is the difficulty of defeating a decentralized urban insurgency from the air alone. Over the past years, militant groups have adapted by dispersing command structures and relying on smaller autonomous cells that blend into the urban fabric. These units use ambushes, sniper fire, improvised explosive devices, and hit-and-run raids to inflict damage and then vanish into buildings and underground tunnels. Air power can destroy infrastructure and deny safe havens, but it struggles to locate and neutralize dispersed fighters who exploit the complexity of a crowded city. That operational challenge pushed commanders to accept the risks of an extended ground campaign. Tunnels, remote-controlled demolitions, and urban clearance. A defining feature of the current operation is the methodical demolition of urban blocks and the use of remote-controlled, explosive-laden vehicles to clear buildings or suspected tunnel entrances. These controlled vehicle detonations allow forces to breach fortified positions and collapse tunnel mouths without sending soldiers into immediate close-quarters demolition work. The method is brutal and effective at denying subterranean movement, but it also devastates residential infrastructure and renders whole neighborhoods uninhabitable. The result, military planners say, is to neutralize underground networks. The consequence for civilians is mass displacement and effectively erased neighborhoods. International observers and humanitarians have warned that this scale of destruction creates a long-term urban catastrophe. Forced displacement as a strategic outcome. One of the darkest dimensions of this offensive has been the explicit planning for and impact of large-scale civilian displacement. Mass evacuation orders and the demolition of entire blocks have pushed nearly 1 million residents southward or into ever-shrinking zones of safety, according to repeated field reporting and humanitarian snapshots. While previous campaigns issued evacuation warnings, the current operation's combination of firepower, demolition, and encirclement appears aimed at creating depopulated buffer zones. A tactical choice with severe humanitarian and political consequences. Safe corridors are limited, and many civilians remain trapped amid the fighting, unable to access food, water, or medical care. Humanitarian agencies have repeatedly warned about famine, disease, and catastrophic civilian suffering in the wake of these maneuvers. How Israel sees the threat, preventing a resurgence. From the Israeli perspective, the operation is framed as preventing a long-term threat. Commanders argue that unless remaining fighters, weapons caches, and tunnel networks are destroyed, Hamas can regroup and reconstitute attacks that threaten Israeli civilians. This fear of a resurgence, combined with political pressure to ensure national security after devastating attacks, helped produce the decision to shift from aerial bombardment to intensive ground operations. In the IDF's view, only boots on the ground can accurately clear basements, tunnels, and narrow alleys where insurgents operate. How the ground fight unfolds. Phases and forces. The offensive is planned as a sequence of phases. First, forces encircle target districts to isolate fighters and force civilian movement away from battle zones. Then come precision strikes supported by artillery and air power to collapse known command nodes and tunnels. After that, specialized units, including sappers, engineers, and reconnaissance teams, enter to detect and neutralize remaining threats, often assisted by remote demolition vehicles to reduce soldier exposure. Regular infantry then conducts door-to-door clearance, a harrowing, risky process where close-quarters engagements and ambush risks are constant. The operation integrates armored formations, infantry fighting vehicles, and auxiliary units operating in tandem with aerial surveillance and precise munitions. This phase-based approach is designed to minimize IDF casualties while maximizing the disruption of militant capabilities. Ambushes, IEDs, and urban guerrilla tactics. Hamas's response to large-scale ground operations has been to intensify asymmetric warfare. Fighters rely on the dense urban landscape to stage ambushes, place IEDs, and strike at vulnerabilities in armored vehicles. Rear hatches and troop doors on IFVS and APCS represent tactical weak points. Insurgents aim to exploit these vulnerabilities with anti-tank weapons, recoilless rifles, and guided missiles. IDF doctrine for countering ambushes emphasizes rapid suppression, smoke screens, and aggressive maneuver to dislodge attackers, while commanders call in indirect fire and close air support as needed. These engagements are lethal, chaotic, and often take place within a few dozen meters of civilian dwellings. The logistics, the legal, and the moral dimensions beyond military mechanics. The offensive raises complex legal and moral questions. Rules of engagement, the protection of civilians, access for humanitarian agencies, and the legal authority for prolonged occupation are all contested. International organizations have repeatedly urged adherence to international humanitarian law, expanded humanitarian corridors, and efforts to reduce civilian harm. Governments and diplomats are engaged in shuttle diplomacy to manage the political fallout, while human rights groups document damage and displacement. The outcome of this campaign will shape not only immediate security calculations, but also the region's political future for years to come. What comes next? If the IDF achieves its operational aims, the city could be left under long-term Israeli control with a severely reworked urban layout and massive reconstruction needs. If the offensive stalls or political pressures mount, the fighting could continue to degrade into attrition with catastrophic humanitarian results. Either way, the strategy's success depends on more than battlefield victories. It requires political solutions, reconstruction plans, and credible pathways for civilians to return safely. Without those, any military gains risk collapsing into renewed cycles of resistance and violence. Cities are not just strategic prizes. They are places of memory, life, and human connection. When warfare erases neighborhoods and forces entire populations to flee, the consequences ripple across generations. What started as an operation to dismantle militant networks has become one of the central humanitarian and geopolitical crises of this era. For anyone trying to understand the scale and stakes of the September 2025 offensive, the facts are stark: a massive mobilization, a phased ground occupation strategy, and millions of civilians squeezing into shrinking safe zones. The rest will be written in the months and years to come, in courtrooms, reconstruction plans, and the memories of those who lived through the invasion. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section.